There is full government overreach coming out of the Department of Education at the hands of the state superintendent. And that means that he is determining how to administer the ESA program outside of his executive authority.
And welcome back to Square Off. It's Republican versus Republican in the 2026 primary for state school superintendent. You just heard State Treasurer Kimberly Yee. She's been recruited by the Capitol's far-right Freedom Caucus to primary state school superintendent Tom Horne. How has Horne offended the Trumpist faction? And why is Kimberly Yee doing this? We have answers to all those questions and more. Joining us this morning, Democratic consultant Tony Connie of Radar Strategies and Barrett Marson, Republican of Marson Media. Welcome back to Square Off, gentlemen.
It's good to be here.
Let's go back to what we heard in Mary Jo Pitzel's solid analysis of what's going to happen in the coming month at the Capitol. Your expectations, Tony Connie?
I mean, they're going to be scrambling to get something done, but they don't have all the information that they need, because I think one thing, while they're focusing on all this other junk, the fact that the Trump administration is planning on cutting this Medicaid, which a lot of that money would go to the state, they don't really have a plan to fill that. And so, like, instead of focusing on, you know, the stuff that they've been focusing on, like trying to like put ESAs into the Constitution, they really should be trying to focus on that, but they're not. And so I don't know how they're going to get to a resolution in time to get this done.
You know, one of the positive things about this, I have not heard any mention of a Republican go-it-alone budget and we're going to try and ram something down Katie Hobbs's throat. We've heard that in previous years, right? And they actually expanded a little bit, the majority of one seat in each chamber, so they could conceivably do a Republican-only budget that would get vetoed and, you know, sort of start that little dance. But they haven't. They just are working with Katie Hobbs, and quite frankly, if you ask me, probably wise. They understand that they've gotten the better of her in the last two budgets. And I think Democrats would agree with that, wouldn't you, Tony?
No, of course I would not agree with that.
A lot of Democrats were angry over the last 2 years about the budget. But anyways, we digress. I think they are, you know, just negotiating. They're not going to be a go-it-alone. They're not going to do draconian things, and just, you know, they're going to try and negotiate and get it wrapped up reasonably quickly. And there's no reason to have members just wait around, so they might as well send them home.
Okay, we'll get back on whether Democrats are happy or not with Katie Hobbs' budget. Okay, let's turn to that school superintendent race. Kimberly Yee will be termed out of office as state treasurer, 2 full terms. She needs a new job. She does have a background in education policy. This isn't too far afield for her. How surprised are you, Barrett, to see Kimberly Yee lining up with Jake Hoffman, the Freedom Caucus, the Trumpers to do this?
No, that certainly is a little surprising, given that she was basically kicked off the bus, right? 2 years ago for the big state tour of statewide candidates, Carrie Lake, Mark Fincham, Blake Masters, all those guys. They didn't really want Kimberly around. You know, she just wasn't MAGA enough. Even though she spoke at a Turning Point rally.
She did, yes.
In 2021.
Right, with all the, you know,
but, you know,
election
she's also,
was rigged crew.
Look, she's also a Schwarzenegger person, right? She literally worked in the Schwarzenegger administration in California doing education policy. It is one of the big things on her resume of her education experience. And so it does make it a little strange, but, you know, your enemy is my enemy, and so I think there's a little bit of that. Remember, there's a long history between the Yee faction and Tom Horne. Yee really, you know, came up under former state senator.
You're going way back.
I know, way back.
You weren't born yet.
Your viewers will remember Dean Martin beat Tom Horne for the state legislature.
Yeah, but that's not what this is about.
And so
Dean Martin, that's not what this is about.
Deep-seated.
That's not. This is 100% about the fact that she is putting her political future in the hands of the family that bought that, you know, $16,000 cello. Like, she is running for office for superintendent because of that. She wants to defend those types of expenditures, and it is a wild choice. That is something I don't understand. Maybe that's going to help you win a Republican primary. I don't know if it will. It certainly will hurt you in a general election.
And I want to be clear about this, because this is the big battle right now among parents and behind the scenes, the ESA voucher advocates who want no limits on how parents
like
spend
0 limits,
on empowerment,
no reform,
that's
no chasing down fraud.
And so I think Tom Horne gets to hold the mantle of, I'm doging this program. I'm getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse so that we make it
mainly
stronger.
Abuse.
Yeah, so that we make it a stronger program.
The only reason he's doing this is because the public pressure is so high. to root out some of this stuff. Like, he obviously, it's very clear he didn't want to do this before, but he's been pressured to do it. And so it's so surprising that knowing that, seeing this dynamic, that Yee is deciding to jump in and be on the side of these people taking advantage of taxpayers.
Is that what Horne's done wrong here? They claim she virtually said he's breaking the law.
Yeah, they're claiming that yes, that seems to be the central claim, is that he is not saying just do whatever you want.
Right.
Unfettered access to tax dollars.
But remember, there's only less than 100,000 families on the ESA program. So this is not, I mean, it's a popular program, certainly amongst that clique, but that's not a majority of the electorate. So she has a base to start going after those people, but that doesn't win you the primary necessarily. So it's going to have to be broader than that.
What about Senator Jake Hoffman? He's positioned himself as kind of a power broker right now.
He's attempting to be the kingmaker, but, you know.
Well, he said he was going to recruit somebody for school superintendent. He did,
right.
Kimberly Yee. Now he's saying he's taking aim at the Arizona Corporation Commission and the 2 Republicans up for re-election in 2026. What does he want here?
I got to tell you, even if he wins those races, I would still call him maybe a prince maker, not quite the kingmaker, given how lowly those positions are. But look, it is an attempt for this faction of the party to gain control at all levels of government, top to bottom. And, you know, they see that as a mission.
And so in going after the Corporation Commission, you're also taking on APS, one of those powerful companies in the state. Right, they're regulated by the Corporation Commission. They have a vested interest in what happens there. Jake Hoffman tweeted back at me, pointing out that Ted Geisler is on the Arizona Chamber of Commerce of Industry board, I think, which pushed back on Jake Hoffman. I'll be blunt about this. Is this a shakedown of APS, which has been a big political player, and they want a piece of that Jake Hoffman and his far-right
I mean,
caucus?
there's certainly been a lot of history of like retribution, you know, from him with his political decisions that he's been making, and so, you know, I think that's entirely possible. I mean, I'm not like this type of like infighting in the Republican Party is what has led to many of the Democratic victories in the past couple of cycles, because it is pushing to the far right. You know, people who are probably even out of the mainstream of major Republicans. And so, you know, that's what Hoffman is trying to do. Like, Hoffman, you know, he recruited Collin, the former Secretary of State, who is a very far-right sort of, you know, lawyer in these election denier things. And I'm not so sure how committed to winning he is, because in that race, for example, Collin only raised like $1,200. So how much of this is just about him making threats, trying to build power? How much of this is him actually trying to win? I guess we'll find out. And I'm not, you know, I'm happy to be a Democrat in this circumstance.
Does this make superintendent a winnable seat for Democrats?
Yeah, I think it makes superintendent a win. I think it's always a winnable seat. I think this makes it a more attractive seat to candidates that might otherwise have not been willing to run for it, because knowing that this fight's going to happen, knowing that one of them is going to.
But they have no top tier. The Democrats right now have no top tier SPI candidate. So it might just be the Republican by default.
All right,
we'll see.
God ended there. Barrett Marson, Tony Connie, thanks so much for joining.